There we go.
All right. Well, welcome everyone from all over the world. It's just a really exciting thing to have everyone join us on these monthly Harp forums, and that Mary Radspinner has organized. And we really appreciate that. And just Kimberly introduced herself a few moments ago. I'm Therese Honey in Houston, and we have a wonderful presenter today, Amelia Romano. And she looks like she has a really, really great education. You can go to her website to read more about her bio. And she has lots of stuff to teach us today about teaching lever harp changes and many more things too. And she's got some arrangements that you can look at on her website. And I'm babbling on and on and on. I'm just going to say, Amelia, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Therese, and thank you, Mary and Kimberly. It's nice to connect with harp teachers and students from around the country and world. I really have come to appreciate Zoom and how you can connect and share so much without being in the same room. So I'm going to start off by actually just sharing a slideshow that I've made and kind of give you the context to why I started this online community now about a year ago. But I've, let's see. So I've been probably playing chromatic music for almost a decade now. But a number of years ago, I found myself just working with different seasoned musicians and realizing, how do I want to bring the lever harp onto whatever stage it wants to be on? But before I jump into all of that, I just wanted to start out with, raise your hand, even if I can't see you, raise it anyways, if you teach chromatic music to your students currently. I'm guessing all of you either play lever or pedal harp, or only pedal harp but have lever harp students. And then, if you already do teach chromatic music, which is fantastic, because when I was growing up, I didn't play as much chromatic music. Whom of you would like a larger catalog of chromatic repertoire? Again, just raise your hand. Whether I can see you or not, that's okay. I'm just curious because it was exciting for me when I started working with classical musicians, because they didn't understand the lever harp that well, which meant I got to decide what they understood about it and how they thought about it. And that meant I got to challenge myself to kind of push beyond the Latin American folk and world music background that I grew up with that didn't include very many lever changes. I often would just think about, you set the key and you played the song, and the music was so thrilling and exciting for me, I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. But the more collaborations I did, the more I realized there was more to the world. So I want to start out by just sharing a welcome video that I created when I first launched the lever harpist movement last June. Welcome to the Lever Harp for the Modern Harpist movement. My name is Amelia Romano. Growing up, I played folk music on the lever harp. I soon found myself performing with seasoned classical chamber musicians, and I craved the possibility of performing classical as well as jazz standards, as well as folk music that was chromatic on the lever harp. I soon found myself arranging these works for lever harp. This gave my repertoire so much freedom and possibility. I decided to start this Patreon page to invite other lever players that want to expand their repertoire to have this opportunity. Every month, I'll send out either a classical, jazz, or folk piece that is chromatic, with a video that has tips on how to approach the work. For those that are interested, we will have a monthly virtual gathering to connect with like-minded souls and talk and play through the music. Check out my Patreon page and become a member today. I look forward to meeting you. So that was the initial welcome video, and really it was to give people a sense for why did I start this and why does it matter to me. So just a bit more, as I said, when I started working with seasoned classical musicians, I realized learning to navigate chromatic repertoire was vital to the success of lever harp and chamber music, specifically within the classical world. When I began reimagining chromatic music on lever harp, I did not know how it would be received. But to my excitement, both lever players that want to expand their comfort shifting levers and their lever dexterity, as well as pedal harpists that just wanted a more portable chromatic voice, have been curious as to what I've been creating and arranging the music-wise. So the ultimate kind of goal with the lever harp for the modern harpist is bringing cross-genre chromatic music to the lever harp community. And when I say lever harp community, I mean really harp community at large, because as we know, many of us play both pedal and lever, or might have students that play a lever harp. And we also want to maybe play a jazz piece on a lever harp because it's obviously easier to transport. So really this movement is about connecting the harp community globally to show the lever harp is more than just a diatonic instrument. So what I've had so much fun with over the past year is finding folk music, specifically Middle Eastern music in this last year, as well as classical music and jazz standards that have a couple accidentals. And something that I learned from doing the seminars, as well as reimagining classical works that I did as part of my master's degree, was that not all of us want to spend months and months preparing a advanced classical work on lever harp. So this movement really looks at creating beginner and intermediate level pieces that your students and yourself might really enjoy putting into your gig book. The idea really is to encourage more people to share the lever harp within a chromatic context. So in addition to, of course, every month I share sheet music, but I also create supplementary materials because I find what inspires us to learn a piece. We often hear it performed or we hear a recording of it, and then we're curious to learn more. So every month I make a recording of the arrangements that I've put together, and then I also offer tips because a lot of the repertoire encourages us to build our lever dexterity and our comfort shifting. But of course, that comfort doesn't just require practice, it also requires approaches that enable the practice to succeed. So I wanted to share the catalog that I've created to date. And again, if you just only really love jazz music, which I get, every 3 months you get a jazz piece. And the fun thing is, because I'm working within the public domain, I'm going back to the early 1920s or 1910s to look at some really fun blues tunes. So as you can see, the last 2 jazz tunes was a Memphis Blues and St. Louis Blues, both by H.C. Handy. But then, of course, for those that really love classical music, or for the students that you have that might be really wanting to stay on lever harp long term, but don't just want to play folk music or Celtic music or Latin American music, there are really great classical options, which I've found particularly exciting because when I did my master's degree, I was really working with more demanding classical repertoire, but I didn't want my students to feel that they would have to work and wait years to be able to play that classical piece on the lever harp. So like, for example, the Minuet in G by Bach. We all know that piece. It's beautiful and it's quite simple, yet it has the chromatic, I like to call it like a chromatic spice that gives it a little bit of a different touch. And then of course, the Bach, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. Oftentimes when I teach, and you might find this for yourself too, is that you like to give your student a slight challenge that they can build towards, but at the same time give them something that they can kind of play right in that moment and like sight read through. And so some months I put out a piece like, obviously, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring is a bit more complex for even an early intermediate player. However, if they know that they can work towards that in the next year or 2, and they totally can play it on the lever harp, and then instead you give them a Minuet in G as a starting point that they can kind of feel successful in the moment, right? We kind of, as teachers, we like to give our student that challenge and at the same time be like, and you also can do this right now. So you have something to work towards, but you also, in the moment, feel really good about yourself, which is so critical to being a teacher and has been really important for me. So it kind of has been fun in putting this presentation together to look at the repertoire that's been built so far just in this first year of me finding music. And again, when I first started this platform, I think it was so specifically about creating a space where people feel invited. And so I oftentimes say, if you have a piece that you really want to play on lever harp, or your student brings a piece that they really want to play but they're not quite sure how to approach it, write to me. Because I'm having to do the research every month to find the pieces and making sure they have just enough lever shifts. And then from there, making an arrangement that, one big thing, as I said, is how can we challenge ourselves and challenge our students, but also show them the way. And I've done a lot of, as I said, seminars where I focus on just starting with exercises on how to do lever shifting. So in a bit, I'm going to bring up a couple pieces that I actually recorded for this movement, but I often find, just like when we start practicing every day, we start with exercises before we go to a piece of music. I've put together a number of lever shifting exercises because ultimately it's really satisfying to be able to feel like the levers are part of the music versus this separate piece that's in the way of us playing the music. But of course, how do we get there? We do exercises that enable us to start moving those levers as we're playing the notes within that space. So I now want to just share two different pieces that will hopefully give you a sense for what's available on lever harp, but also give you, it's like a good challenge and at the same time an invitation. So this first one is St. Louis Blues by H.C. Handy, and I'm just going to play 2 minutes of it. It's actually pretty, I guess I already have it up here. Let me just go to this one. So, and what's particularly fun about this one is that you also get to practice your swinging on the harp, because it's very much a swing number. So in the monthly email that you receive, I talk about how to swing and also how to approach the bass line, because it's not standard classical technique. So that gives you a short clip of my arranging process, and oftentimes I'll just, have the simple melody, often played on trumpet or some other brass instrument, but you can kind of see how it I arranged to really work with what the harp has to offer between the bass line patterns, as well, of course, the recording we just listened to was the beginner version of St. Louis Blues, and I'm still kind of in the arranging process how to make it as invitational as possible, because of course for those who have students that really have never done lever shifts before, this might feel a bit daunting. However, I did put an article in Harp column a few years back, and I made a number of tips as for someone wanting to teach lever shifting to their students. And one of them was that what really matters in my view is to choose a tempo that works for the student where they feel confident and they enjoy playing the piece. So it's not so much about trying to reach a certain speed, for example. We know in classical music sometimes you get a piece of music and it says the quarter note equals 80, and it's important to respect that note. However, with a jazz standard, or even for myself with some classical pieces that were written for piano, it's just not technically as feasible to play them at that speed on the lever harp, or even pedal harp, for example. So what I've found very helpful for myself is when I'm working on a piece, knowing the tempo that I can play the most challenging chromatic passage. And then from there, like we do with learning any piece of music, working my way kind of outwards from there. Okay, this is a really hard measure, and then I'm going to build out a little bit. So I know I sent or shared a handout that has, I believe, let's see, do I? No, I think my handout does not have St. Louis Blues. However, I'm going to pull it up for everyone. So anyone that is near their harp and wants to just try the beginning part of it, or just wants to look it through and kind of see how the music looks on your stand. Something that I'm always...
We need to get the link up on that.
So I probably should just, let's see, because I realize that's the one, I don't know if I actually have a link for it. Let me see if I can.
Oh, or the file.
Yeah, I wonder how big does it get when I put it pretty big here? Is it pretty decent, acceptable?
I think that's very acceptable. I couldn't find the file just put up
Yeah,
there.
no, I didn't send anything to you. So what I want anyone that's near their harp just to take a look at it for a moment, because something that we know as pedal harp players or teachers, we have our pedal markings. But in this music, what I tend to do is I say set, and then I have a specific lever that we put in place. And then from there, anytime you do a lever shift, if there's too much going on in the music, I just put it above, in this case, the treble clef, so you can still very visibly see what's going on. Or if there's enough space, like at the first ending, I'll put a natural sign right here to tell you, okay, I have to switch these two levers before I go back to the top. So again, this piece is relatively accessible, which I think is really important because, again, as we know as teachers, the moment you give something that's just a little too much, I think we all kind of shrink back and just put it away, you know? And oftentimes I found myself with chromatic music and lever shifts having a hesitation moment. But for your students that are just starting out and wanting to do lever shifting, I think this is a fun number because you can take it even slower than what you just heard. But it's a great way, one, to practice swing. And even sometimes when I'll be working on a piece with lever changes, I might just work on the melody for a moment, especially if it has a rhythm that I'm less familiar with. And so, for example, I go all the way through the first ending just playing the melody, and then once I had a kind of a feel for it, I will start to add in those lever shifts. And slowly, it'll become part of the music, because as we all know, it's discouraging when you feel like something's getting in the way. Oftentimes with beginner students, when you put in the left hand, all of a sudden it feels frustrating because you're adding one more variable and the right hand kind of gets shaky sometimes. So, as I said, I put these lever markings in so that you can easily see where you're going next. There's a number of different ways of marking, but I found this to be pretty easy to understand and helpful. And then, as I mentioned, you put it above when you have a series of lever shifts, what's just too hard to fit in between. So I'm not sure, does anyone have their harp with them and actually want to try out the first line? for example? Or shall I first share some of the other, I have one other piece that I wanted to chat about and give people kind of a sense for how this translates onto lever harp. I'm just gonna play the first line for you, and let's see what key it's in. So the more advanced version actually has a left hand pattern that mutes and then plays the thumb kind of like open thumb in Latin music. And so what's actually also fun about sharing music every month is because I give 2 different levels. And then you can share it with your student, for example, and you might find that one level has a left-hand pattern you really like, but the other level has slightly more accessible lever shifts. So I could take that advanced left-hand pattern and I could switch it out with the beginner, or what I call intermediate left-hand pattern. And so you can essentially mix and match and create a sound that really meets either your or your student or both of your comfort with the technique as well as with the lever shifts. And that gives you more freedom, because as oftentimes we get pieces that are just, in this case, I just got the melody that was written for the trumpet. And then it's, how fast do you want to take it? What do you want to do with the left hand? And do you want to play it 2 times through, or do you want to play it 5 times through? So in many ways, I'm hoping that by sharing this music, not only will you get comfort building your dexterity with lever shifting, or get comfort trying more genres, but also if you like to arrange music, or your student brings you a piece and you're like, I want you to be able to play this, but I don't quite know how to develop it for the harp, you might get simple ideas from seeing my 2 arrangements of an intermediate and advanced version, and noticing the different left-hand patterns or ways to do lever shifting that enables, your left hand to both be interesting, but also get the lever shifts done. So I'm just gonna play, I know we just heard it, but one thing I find helpful when teaching lever shifting, beyond just the exercise that I mentioned, which the exercise, because I mentioned it numerous times now, I'm just gonna show you the basics of what it is, and I will stop sharing for a moment, kind of give you the breakdown of how to approach lever shifting with your students. Is all instruments pretty much learn the circle of fifths pretty early on, because you need to be able to play all keys on violin, viola, cello, bass, etc. But on lever harp, for me, I didn't really understand the circle of fifths for quite some time because I wasn't spending enough time looking at their relationship. However, this exercise I created is you're walking through all the circle fifths that you can, because the lever harp only has access to 8 of the 12 major keys in their relative minors. However, you're practicing lever shifting and the theory behind the relationship between keys. So this harp is tuned to D flat major, but I'm going to start on F major. And what I do is I place a scale, and then after I play the left hand, starting on F, we're doing F major, right after I play the B flat, I mute it at the top, and then I shift the lever, and then I go an octave higher and shift the lever. And then, of course, we all know C major comes next. So I play C major, and I do the same thing. Right after I play the thumb, which is on the F, I mute the F, and I shift the lever, and go up an octave and shift the next lever. And so, all of a sudden, I'm able to climb up through all the major scales, and I'm practicing doing my scales at the same time as I'm practicing shifting. And for those that find even that a little daunting, because again, we're trying to be musical with scales and simultaneously shift, something I find extremely helpful is saying the word shift. Because when we want to learn something well, we have to do it slowly, so it becomes part of our brain versus just our finger work and a sonic experience for our ears. So as I play it through this time, I'm just going to say the word shift. And so for students, whatever level they're at, they can do this exercise before they then work on looking at the lever shifts in the piece that they're given. So that way, by the time they get to the piece, your brain is already thinking about levers a little bit more. And another part of the article I put in the Harp column magazine was, not only do you start at a tempo that works to do the most challenging shifts, but also make sure you eyeball the levers you're going to before you shift them. Because unlike pedal harp, where your feet know where the 7 pedals are, none of these levers feel any different, no matter what octave they're in or what note they're associated with. So your job is to make sure you see the lever before you shift it to make sure it's the right one. So as I practice this time, I'm going to eyeball the lever, but then I'm also going to make sure I say shift so that I get in my brain that action. So I'm going to do the same 3 scales, starting on F major. And just to note, you can literally choose starting on any scale you want to, but you then work your way around the circle of fifths. And for lever players, a lot of us have our harp tuned with 4 flats, so we can access up to 3 sharps. So put all your levers down and start from there. It's really quite simple. It applies no matter where you start. So starting on F, and then I look at the B and I shift it, look an octave higher and I shift up to C. Shift, shift, G, shift. So just try that simple exercise or give it to your student and see how they do with that. Because sometimes we don't know we're capable of until we try an exercise and find, wait, that is so accessible for my fingers. So now, bouncing back to St. Louis Blues, which I'm going to share on the screen again, because I know some of you will want to play along with me. So as I said, whenever I share an arrangement, I also talk about the technique behind it. So this particular level is just as simple with the left hand, 4th finger on that C and then C, G, so C chord. So, going on. But because we're lever harp, we want to set our levers that we don't need. For example, here we have an A flat, and we can set that lever so that we don't have to shift it when we get to measure 2. Because whatever we can set, we want to set. It's golden for us. So we start out with that A flat in place, and then we simply have, and then something very important is to close your fingers quickly. In classical music, it just is helpful because it keeps you relaxed, it gives you a big sound, and you get where you need to go next. But on lever harp, the one question I didn't ask yet is, what hand do we shift with 98% of the time? I know everyone knows the answer. Exactly, we shift with our left hand. So, the sooner we can get off the string, the sooner we can get to that lever to make the shift happen. So I get off the string as quickly as possible, and then, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, she just played the A once. Yes. So here comes, I'll do my best to speak to the different lever shifting tips that are really helpful. But just like in pedal harp, we have pedal harp slides. Here, the lever harp slide is equally important because that way we only have to play the note once. And then we get a slightly different effect versus, which sounds a little less jazzy, but also is a little bit more work. So, if I were practicing this with my student, for example, I'd have them just take for a moment the lever shift itself. So I'd say, have them count this measure and shift where we need to shift. And the only 2 places we need to shift is going to the A natural and then the E flat right afterwards. So what I want them to practice doing is say 1 and 2 and 3. So they shift right before the 2 and right before the 3. And so it's getting that timing, because as we know with lever shifting, if we shift in the right place, the music stays alive. But if we shift in the wrong place, all of a sudden the music gets hindered. And so we want to think about learning lever shifts like we think about learning the music, the notes, and the rhythm. And much of my playing is actually connected with timing and counting. So if I'm lever shifting and counting at the same time, I make sure that I do the same way every single time. And so I'll just practice, for example, in that second measure, 1 and 2 and 3. And I'll get those lever shifts in place and knowing they'll happen every time the same way. So that then, when I get to that left hand again, and so it becomes more musical than extra work or a hindrance to the music. And of course, that is the biggest lever shift in the first all the way through the first ending. So just based on what I just shared, watch how I play from all the way from the beginning to the end of the first ending, and just set those levers so that they happen in time of the rhythm. And one thing I'm going to note before I continue, so I don't forget, is Kimberly, if you want to just put the link in again for the virtual movement that's online, so people can just kind of browse even as I'm talking to give you a sense for what it looks like to be part of the community. So going back to this piece of music, and again, if you have your harp with you, try it out, because I find that I like to do lecture style, but I also find it helpful to practice something myself, because otherwise I hear it but I don't really internalize it, and then when I go to a piece of music that would be helpful to reapply those skills, I'm not as able to remember what they were. So if you have your harp near you, or you just want to even practice air harp, whatever it takes to remember this information, I'm just going to start from the beginning and go all the way down to the first ending. And obviously the only two big lever spots are measure 2 and the second measure of the first ending. So like any piece of music, when you're working with your students, notice where those big lever shifts are. And as you'll notice here, I do mark them with a diamond, and then to the left, the accidental that's required. But when I'm actually working on my own music, I don't usually put a diamond in place. I use 4-score, and I'll just take red and I'll put a B or a flat sign in there, or I'll put a natural sign, or I'll put a sharp sign, and then I might put an arrow above that sign that is either facing up or facing down. Because we know with music, the better roadmap you give yourself, the more information you can intake at a fluid speed, versus having to constantly stop and diagnose what exactly something means. So with this particular virtual movement, I'm giving you the resources to then just be able to play it. But if you find yourself with a piece of music that you want to learn with chromatic passages, that is one great approach. Have your accidental in a different color so you know that this is an action you have to take, and then knowing what direction, because with levers, when they're all up and down and all sorts of octaves, it gets really confusing quickly. So again, I'm going to play just from the top, and if you have a harp with you, please try it out with me, because as I said, we learn by doing. So from the top. Shift, shift. Here, I shift with my right hand over the neck of the harp, and precisely because the left hand wants to keep going. And we could switch and play the bass line with the right hand, but we don't really need to. We're at a tempo where we really can handle those shifts. But just like when we're playing a piece of music and we make it clear that, okay, these notes are taken by the right hand or these notes are taken by the left hand, when it comes to lever shifting, if you want to make the same mental note to yourself, by all means, go for it. Because then when you get back to that measure, you'll know, oh right, I shifted with my right hand. And then you won't have to rethink the same thing over again. I'm now gonna share the other piece, which is the beautiful Nocturne number 3 by Liszt.
Is this a video?
Are you not seeing it?
Just seeing you.
You're just seeing me. Well, let
I
me.
see
I'm
the
gonna,
video.
I'm
I
doing
see
it.
the
I'm gonna do a
video.
take two. I'm gonna do a take two, so
See
that
the
we're
video.
all on the same page. Yeah, sometimes screen sharing doesn't work as well when you switch pages without stopping and resharing. So take two. Success.
See it.
So that gives you a bit of a sense for the piece and how it translates to lever harp. And what I was just mentioning about the St. Louis Blues and how you want to keep the left hand going so you switch with your right hand. This piece, the left hand is so much of everything because the right hand is so dainty and delicate, the melody line, and then the left hand is kind of an ongoing forward motion, but there's a lot of chromaticism. So what's really important here is that you're able to take the left hand patterns with your right hand, or rather the bass clef with your right hand. So I now want to, let's see, is everyone seen Nocturne sheet music? Fantastic. So, as we can see, the gnarly part doesn't really arrive till measure 8. However, when we get there, what's really important is that we're able to move between right and left hand with the right hand taking bass clef notes. So what I did to make it really clear that the left hand is that the right hand is taking the bass clef notes is I put fingering at measure 13, the and of 1, the B section. I put the fingering above the notes to indicate that the right hand is taking those bass clef notes. And that way, you know, it becomes a dance between the two hands. And something I also put together as part of this this online community is I create etudes every month. So when you get a piece of music, I'll find the most uncomfortable section and I'll build it into an exercise. Because of course, if we get comfortable with an uncomfortable section through an exercise, when we actually get to the piece, when you get that particular passage, it's like, oh, my fingers know this. So the exercise looks at how to basically start something with your left hand and then take over with your right hand. And that builds your confidence so that when you get to a passage like this, you're like, oh, I know what to do. So again, if you have your harp with you, fantastic, let's try it together. If not, I'm gonna verbally share what I do to help you understand kind of how to read the music. Because again, so much of enjoying and being inspired to lever shift is having instructions that create results. So if it's starting by just doing a simple exercise like I showed you with the circle of fifths, to understanding what the music is saying so you know exactly how to approach it. And then I also give tip videos, so I'll show, okay, this is how you do this particular passage with your right hand, taking the left hand notes or the bass clef notes. So for measure 13, what's happening is you start with both hands, and what I do is I use my second finger for both hands. And everyone actually should have this handout, so I might stop sharing if that's okay, or no one does? Okay, because I did put this into the worksheet handout, but it doesn't really matter. I'm sure everyone can figure it out, and I'll verbalize it so that way it'll be helpful. So the first note, the downbeat, is with both hands. But then the and of 1, you place your right hand third finger on that B flat, and then you put your 2 and thumb on that C sharp minor chord. So that way you take all the notes happening on the and of 1 and beat 2 with your right hand. So it becomes downbeat, both hands. And then as you play the B flat, you shift the C sharp, and then you get that chord with your right hand. Then you take the left hand again, the bass clef with your left hand. And then the downbeat again happens with both hands. And then again, you take the bass clef with your right hand. And again, shift that C sharp to a C natural. And then I have to move the music over a little bit. And this is where it gets particularly fun, because here we actually have to place our right hand for the 3 notes in the bass clef, F, A, and C, and that A in the treble clef. And so we're playing a chord. So we have single note, and chord. But simultaneously, we are shifting the B and C to C, B natural, C sharp, and the G to a G net sharp. So if you have a student that might already be enjoying shifting levers and want a little bit of a challenge, this is a perfect song, because here, a technical piece is that the B and C we can shift at the same time. And it shouldn't matter what type of levers you have. I have Chromatic levers, so I'm really able to shift quite easily 2 levers at the same time in pretty quick succession. But if you have truant levers, for example, you probably should still be able to put them up at the same time because they're next to each other. But I always like to say, experiment with your levers, experiment with what techniques you can come up with to getting those shifts to happen, and help your students to find what works for 1, their hands, and 2, the type of levers they have. But this song is so great because many of us know this piece, which, as we know as teachers, one of the biggest things to inspiring a student is, are we familiar with the melody? Do we know what we're aiming for? And sometimes the recording does that, but other times just having heard it out in the world and in your life does the charm. So this melody is relatively known, but then you get to start building your comfort taking the treble clef and the bass clef with your right hand, and then doing slightly more complex lever shifting passages. So as you're probably getting a sense for, a lot of these pieces, no matter what genre you're in, you're slowly building a music catalog, expanding your genres outside of classical, but also within classical, and building your lever dexterity. So that if you want to play pedal harp for a piece or a whole concert, by all means, yes. But if you want another option, you don't have to completely modify your entire program to only play diatonic music. So I realize it's about chord till, and I probably want to give space for questions, and I can share more based on timing. But that is, in essence, the at the core of what this community is about. It's about showing the lever harp with its boundless potential.
Thank you. And so if people have questions, they can either write them in the chat or holler. I think it's interesting that you do the lever changes with your right hand. This in Suzuki Harp, I don't know if these are still being made. Suzuki Harp came up with a little device that you slip it over the lever, and a cord goes over the top of the neck and has like a little button or knob that you pull on. Only works if you're going from a lowered lever to a raised lever. You still have to lower it with either hand. Somebody got a question?
I don't have a question, but Charlotte Meisner had a fun comment at the beginning that moving levers with your right hand is kind of like moving the E pedal with your left foot.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I also remember I saw something years ago. I don't even know if anybody's making these. Another device that, again, I think Lori Riley had this. It was a curved, like, metal thing, not a wire. You know, it was like it didn't bend or anything, and it slipped over the lever, and she could go to raise the lever and lower the lever, and she could move them around to whatever thing that she wanted.
It was a contraption.
Yeah, yeah.
Dave Kalachny is still making those that
Oh.
you originally mentioned, Therese.
Go good, because I thought maybe he closed his shop or something like that, and maybe
He did, but he's still making them. I bought some last year, but I bought a new Dusty and it had larger Loveland levers, and then I added the tips on them so it didn't fit. But if you have regular Loveland levers, it will fit.
Yeah, I just saw a question, and my approach with the Nocturne number 3 was putting the numbers above the notes if it was for the right hand, if the bass clef notes were for the right hand, and putting the note, I haven't yet had to do this, but putting numbers below the treble clef notes when they're for the left hand, because it's just a similar approach to how we talk about fingering on the instrument, etc.
Yeah, and Amelia's answer was in regard to Jean Mattoon's question about where you could see which hand the fingering numbers refer to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote an
kind of.
article
Oh, go on.
about 15 years ago. I wrote an article about a colorful approach to lever changes that became the cover of the Folk Harp Journal. And it's sort of what you're showing now. You're marking each lever, not just your F's and C's, and then you're marking your music with color to coordinate to which levers you're going to change, so that you don't have to look at all those little diamonds and try to figure out what's going on with them. And you can do it a lot faster doing this. My email is in the chat if anybody wants me to scan and get a copy of the article to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've always used a red. I've always used a red pencil or pen, for my markings, because I play Renaissance harp and medieval harp, and we have no levers, and I have to. In some ways, it's easier. I can fret with left or right, but I don't ever have to find the time to remove the levers. Once I let go, it's changed. And yeah.
I have something, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, good. This is a brand new microphone and didn't know if it would work. Is there a good way, a really foolproof way to identify the lever that you're supposed to aim for? Sometimes I've tied like wire ties around one if I need it. I have very limited experience of changing levers. But is there a good way to identify?
I'm sure there are many, but my general rule of thumb is just practicing the section in which you have to go from the string to the lever. That's particularly daunting, and making it more, building it into your muscle memory.
Okay.
But again, it depends on the player and what you're feeling or wanting.
The dusty strings makes those little rubber rings, and it has blue and red ones, so you can put them around to see if what the red and blue strings. But they also have the thick white and yellow ones, which you could use if you know in this piece you're only using one A or one F or whatever. You can put that around. I personally wouldn't use those, but for those who want, and if you, Charlotte, want to use that, maybe try it out. And you can, if you don't want to order a whole package at Dusty Strings, I'm sure you can just do your own like colorful what's it called, the electrical tape or something like that, just temporarily. So I think it's a nice crutch. I call crutch or training wheels or so, whatever, which I think is totally fine. Use it in the beginning, but then try to get rid of it as soon as you can.
When I first started focusing on lever harp, it was a challenge for me. And this is before we had like the little rings, and I would come up with things to color my C's and F's. But I had one piece that I always had to do this super duper fast, super fast lever change that was always on the same couple of strings. It was a bluegrass tune. And I did have to wrap some tape over it, that helped me. And I don't use that anymore. But so I think it's totally fine. I think you have to adapt it and make it work for you, whatever it is, and do your thing.
Yeah. I'm noticing a question from Natalie here, and I haven't. I think the styles that I adapt for are just styles that I enjoy playing already. I haven't really. I mean, there's certain pieces that there's a point where you spend more time doing lever shifts than actually creating music, and that's that moment where you think, okay, either I take down the tempo or I leave this piece to rest because it's just not translating musically for the listener. But I'll also, in terms of fast tempos, playing higher on the neck, closer to the levers to make those lever shifts happen. And of course, it also just relates to the speed at which your fingers feel comfortable. I mean, anything that you can do slowly, you just build up the tempo for. So oftentimes, I'll also, just like we're used to kind of, shapes on the harp, like what is an octave, what is a third, a fifth with our fingers, I also get those same shapes when it comes to lever shifting. So I can do 2 to 3 levers going down at the same time if I need, or if I have 3 seconds and I need a whole octave, I'll just kind of push them all up and then I'll continue. So there's a lot of different techniques for approaching faster music, and it's mostly just like in playing, how do we make our motions count? So if it's closing faster, if it's being closer to the lever that you need to move, if it's moving 2 at once, if it's taking 1 less note in the harp so you can get up to the neck sooner and get the 3 combinations that are a little trickier. And then of course, there's trial and error, and then just making sure you're breathing and practicing so that it becomes part of how you think in your mind, because we can be fine in our practice room, but other things happen in front of people. So you play something through and experiment till you start to see where the bulletproof shows up. And I'm happy to go into more depth, but that's kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Somebody's writing, imagine the first movement, Pachetti Sonata.
I mean, it really depends on if you're willing to take something at a slightly slower tempo.
Is it Barbara Brundage that she years ago published some really nice arrangements with lots of levers? I asked her if she would do the second movement of the Thai Fair Sonata because I love that piece so much. I wondered if it could be done on lever harp.
Yeah, no, she does a lot of great work from, transposing it to a different key so that it has a little fewer leverings. Yeah. Or, I mean, I've seen some that just, take out a fast section or a certain passage or, modify. I'm constantly trying to find how do I respect the music without, while keeping it musical. Meaning, I might take out, especially when it's a keyboard piece, they're just it's like a total different landscape for them with their 10 fingers. So understanding like what's the essence of the piece and how to work around it here or there. And some pieces just don't translate that well, even though you work hours and hours on them. So we're just kind of testing the waters and seeing what the limits are. But
yeah, we do if we're transcribing music to the harp, we do have to make compromises. But if you compromise the music too much, you're not getting the real feel of the musicality of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, it really just depends on what music do you want to play and what adjustments are you willing to make. If it's tempo, if it's lever shifting with your right hand, if it's slightly modifying the left hand to make it all happen. It's all kind of a creative and technical circus of sorts, and mental as well, but totally worth it if you enjoy the challenge.
It looks like we're not having any more questions. Amelia, I really want to thank you for your presentations. Yeah. You're a very good communicator, and this is very, very informative. Kimberly, did you have anything you wanted to say at the end?
No, I appreciate your time and certainly what you've shared with all of us today, Amelia. And I hope I'll be checking out that Patreon page as well.
And Mary, do you want to say anything and remind us about next month?
I have a comment. As a piano teacher, I have maybe a dozen piano students, and I noticed that there's always seems to be new repertoire for piano music for beginners and all different stages. Amelia, are you going to write some music?
I've been writing since I was young, and I actually have a whole page of my own original compositions. This movement has actually paused me from writing just because I'm spending every month arranging other people's music to have more of a catalog for the lever harp. But I do have on my website, there's a whole page that has classical reimaginations, duos, solos, and trios of my original music. I can just put the link. You just go to my website and then you can go to sheet music. I should know the URL by now, but I don't. But yes, I do have I have a duo with a woodwind player, and we do a lot of my original works as well.
That's good to know. Good. Yeah, I'm, sometimes you just need something new. You want, or even if you're playing a gig and it's 6 hours, you want to just sight read something new and different and interesting. I really appreciate new music.
Especially chamber music, whatever genre, but harp and other non-harp instruments. I think I would like more of that out there. Quality,
Yeah,
it's
playable. I made a arrangement of Albéniz's Sonata in Re for clarinet and harp, and most of my duo and trio arrangements are of originals, but I do have that one on my shop page that hopefully this link will work. Or maybe
that is a great piece. I love that piece.
Oh no, I put the wrong link in. Anyway, I'm gonna correct it before everyone departs, but thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Amelia.
Thank
Mary,
you.
Mary, what's the next date? What's our next date?
It's the second Thursday in June, and it's was Kimberly's recommendation, Rebecca Todaro, and she is going to be talking about her program for teaching little bitty kids.
Yeah. The itty bitties.
The itty bitties, yes. And Amelia, two more things. I kind of like the way you had the lever changes or the lever shifts above the music. I'm a little dyslexic, so when I start seeing all those diamond shapes, my mind goes somewhere else. So I liked what you had at the beginning of the St. Louis Blues. I like that. And then I just wanted to, the first time I heard about you was you played on Mitch Landy's CD.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't remember what you played, but it was very, very nicely done, and he spoke so highly of you. So that's where I first heard about you.
Cool, thanks. I appreciate that. We all know in the harp world, we all learn of each other and in ways we don't often share.
Yeah. But that was lovely playing on that CD that you did. It was great. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see y'all next month.
Thank you, Amelia. Thanks everyone for coming.
Bye.
Bye now. Bye, everybody.
We do need to stop recording, or I guess it will stop when we...
It'll stop.